Hi, it's Pete the Bumbling Modeler back again. So next thing for the Tilly really is to make a base for it. So what I envisage is it's standing on a concrete hard standing with the grass area off to this side and a little manhole cover there to add a bit of visual interest. So what I've done before I've started filming is I've got a scrap of MDF out of a bin at work, which is you can pick up for peanuts anyway. I've cut this top safe surface with blue masking tape because I don't want the cement I use to stick to this at this moment in time. That'll become clear later on. I've roughly drawn out how I want it. So this diagonal line will be the boundary between the grass on this side and the cement on that side. I've glued some plastic strip around the edges with a bit of super glue and tape the corners so and get a uniform height, because obviously you want this set on all four wheels. There's a chance it won't, but who can say. And I've got a little bit of balsa that's 10mm square, the same height as that lip, so when I trowel over the top we'll be able to see that, pick that out, and we'll have a little square hole we can put the drain cover in. I'm guessing the size of a drain cover, I'm imagining about 18 inches or 500mm square, and if you scale that out to 1/48, it's about 10mm. So that's all we've done on that. So at this point we are almost ready to start. What I'm going to be using to make the base is I've got some cement here and some really fine silica sand. Now the cement, it's easy to get a hold of if you're going to buy 25 kilos or 10 kilos. I can get a little scoop from a source. You could do this just as easily by mixing plaster with the sand to give that gritty, concretey texture. But I don't particularly want to paint a concrete base, and by making it with cement and sand, I end up with a concrete colour without having to worry about painting, and you get that natural colour variation you expect from it. So I shall just get myself sorted out and glove up, and I'll be back with you. Right, we're ready to go. So you'll notice I'm wearing gloves now. If you're playing with cement, cement is a strong alkali, or when it's wet it's a strong alkali, and alkali will burn you as much as an acid. The difference is an alkali will burn you without you feeling it. It kills the nerves faster than send a signal, is the rough theory as I understand it. So you can end up with a burnt hand without actually knowing you're doing yourself any harm. The chance of it happening are quite remote in the way we're doing it. You'd have to have wet cement against your skin for quite a long time, but I wouldn't take the chance. I know I'm okay. I use so much of this stuff. My hands are like leather anyway. But just be sensible about it. If there's a chance of hurting yourself, don't do it. The other thing I'll put down is this old wooden board. I was going to put down white paper, but I noticed on the last video the white was really mucking about with the camera and it was causing a lot of glare. So sorry if that looks a bit rubbish, but this should protect my bench and not cause any glare. So the first thing now to do is roughly measure what we're doing. So we're going 3 parts sand to 1 part cement. I've got no idea how much I need for this base, probably not a lot, but I'm going to concentrate on this area here. So I haven't got enough to go over where the grass is. It's not the end of the world. We'll be doing something else on that side anyway. So I'll do all this real time in case you've never mixed concrete before. It's more of a mortar what we're mixing than a concrete really. So using a shot glass as a measuring cup. So roughly 3 of those. I was going to say it's not science, it is, but it's not something we need to panic about. And use something disposable to mix. This is the lid of an old cotton bud container. That's roughly 3 of those. No matter what you do, it'll set. And I say this is a really fine sand. I don't want to say where I got it from, but it's the sort of stuff you used to put in gerbil cages so they could tunnel, and you can probably get it in art stores, fish tank supplies. Just a really fine single size sand is what you want. Play pit sands, the other thing, you nick some out of your kids' sandpit in the garden, that sort of thing. It's not coarse, it's certainly not sharp. So I'm crashing into that. Let's put the tilly out of the way somewhere so I can see a disaster happening there. Right, and then we've got 3 parts of that. One part of the cement, as I say, be careful and be sensible about it. You could get a burn, so we'll just mix that in. I think that'll be ample for what we're doing. And I say, if you can scrounge some cement from somewhere, put it in a Ziploc bag. Keep it somewhere dry, it'll last forever. So I just want to lightly mix that in. It can get a bit dusty, and again, if you're susceptible to these things, or you're mixing a large amount, I would have a dust mask on. But what you want is that to be pretty, let's sacrifice my steel rule, you want that to be pretty uniform as a mix before you put the water in, then it saves a bit of time. Yeah, that's going to be more than enough for what we want. I mean, it's about 20p worth of ingredients, realistically, although you have to buy it in bulk, so it doesn't matter if you mix way too much, you're better too much than too little. Call that mix, and in here it's just normal tap water, nothing fancy. It doesn't have to be a particularly wet mix this. In fact, a bit of a dry mix would be better for us, because we don't, when you tamp it down, it tends to bleed and the water comes to the surface, and we don't really want a wet mix, so we get that glossy finish. We want it to be quite textured and rough on the surface, just so it'll grab hold of any pigments, which is why I haven't put any pigments to weather the tilly yet. I want the ground to match the dust on the ground to match the dust on the tilly. And if you do the weathering on your truck before you do the base, you forget what pigments you've used, and it can look a bit different. The idea of the pigments really be to blend everything in as one homogeneous lump. It's a stiff mix at the moment, but it would set at that. Once you've got water into cement, you're getting a reaction, so you could put it in as a dry mix and leave it in a damp atmosphere and it'd go off, to be honest. Oops. And this is why we've got a board down a bit more than that. So that's really what we want. We can leave dents in it and indentations. If you go over the top, it's quite creamy, so that's a really quite nice consistency. I get a bit of paper towel ready. Don't know if you noticed I cut my paper towels into quarters, because you tend to find you're only using the edges of a paper towel. So we use a full-size sheet. Most of it you throw out the bin with it never being touched, so it's just a cost-saving device there. So right, we've got our base here. We know we're not as bothered about this side because it's going to have a different finish on it, but here we need to get it in and we need to tamp it all down and level it off so we get a nice level surface for our tilly to sit on. So let's start shoveling this in. So I don't want it to stick to the base. This is why I've got the blue towel down, blue masking tape down. If you were going to do something where you wanted it to stick to the base because you're not going to have the finish we're going to have, then just, you don't need to worry about that. Let's get this ladle in. I do this full size quite often, and model size it's a lot more fiddly, fun enough. But I know what we're trying to do. I wouldn't use your best rule for this either. This is just one I use a universal can opener I mean, straight edge, dig dirt out of your fingernails. It's not a rule I want to take accurate measurements from, or with, sorry. So let's try and get this as nice as we can. Okay, so that's done. That's as simple as that. So that little tapping was just to vibrate it so it compacts a bit. You tend to get a lot of voids in it. It will shrink back, and that will be okay. If we find it's not level enough for the tilly to sit level, then we can deal with that a bit later on. But you see it start to shrink back, and you can make out where we're going to put that drain cover. I was a bit worried we're losing that. So that's concreting done. We can leave that now well alone for it to dry. I'll clean up all this when it's dry because it's usually not wet. One thing to say though, with this we're going to do something a little bit different with the base once it's set. That's why I don't really want it to stick to the board underneath. But there's a difference between setting and curing, so that will set in a few hours in this heat. I would have thought it's going to be weak as anything when it's set. Setting is just going firm. It's a bit like paint. Curing's when the actual chemical reaction takes place, and typically it's 28 days for mortar to reach its full strength. We're not going to wait 28 days, obviously, but I won't do anything with this for at least a day, and I'll probably leave it 2 days before I start to take the sides off the mould, because it's going to be really weak and brittle. So don't rush it once it's set. Just leave it for a few days. I wouldn't leave it too long, because we're going to try and crack it to make some natural sort of cracks and bits and pieces in there, but I would leave well alone. And that's about it. That can sit in there till it sets. The volume of it won't affect the setting time, so that can sit there quite happily. That can sit on a level surface, and take the gloves off safely, turn them inside out, and we've done a bit of concreting for the base. So I'll be back to a little bit more on the Tilly in a second, and then it'll be seconds before you see it, but a few days before it can come back to it and do the other things I need to do on the base. So thanks for keeping with me so far, and I'll see you later on. Okay, back again quickly just to do some of the little bits and pieces. So I don't know if you picked up on the initial video, part of that decal got damaged at some point. I didn't see when I caught it, but it's got a bit of a hole there, and I was just going to leave it, but realistically I like things to have a reason. So if you've got a bit of a damaged decal, then the only way that's damaged is the truck's being scratched. So I'm going to put a little chip and a scratch on that, and just so we know where we're going with the base. I'm not doing the walls, but this is the sort of concrete base we'll be aiming for the hard standing it's on. So nice bit of concrete. I'm going to crack it, which is why I don't want it to stick to the base. That one's got a little inspection hole there. I'll put some slots in ours and just weather it with some earths like that, so it's you get that dust. And this is why I haven't put any dust on the Tilly yet, because I need to use the same dust here as I do on the truck, so it all blends in and looks like one model. Right, so I might end up knocking that thing again, but what I'm going to do is to paint the chip in. That's the original colour, the RAF blue. I've just put a few drops of desert yellow in, because you want to shift the colour. When you get a scratch, you go through the oxide layer on your first lot of paint, you get fresh paint underneath, which is a slightly different colour. So I don't care really what it is, I just want it to be different so it stands out like it's a fresh layer of paint exposed. And it's massively hot today, so I've put a bit of acrylic flow enhancer, only 2 drops, into the little puddle of paint I've got here. And that'll just stop it skinning over, because it's going to be, you don't want big clumps on this. It has to be quite a subtle process. So hopefully I'll stay on camera. I'm going to it's awkward actually when you get that, and just where I've got that chip there in the decal, we'll just gently apply a bit of okay, and that's all it really needs it now. So we've extended that little chip to a scratch along the body. I may put a bit more buff in that and make another little lighter patch. Then I'm going to leave that to harden. Then I'm going to paint a darker patch like a primer in the centre of that. Then we're going to put a little rust streak down the door. Let's just make that a wee bit lighter, I think. We're trying to simulate it's gone through the oxide layer to a lighter bit of paint, then down towards a primer, then down to bare metal, which is then rusted, and put a streak down. That's the sort of 3 things, and you get quite a 3-dimensional effect. So I get a blob of this buff in here. I don't need a great deal. All painting is 90% waste, isn't it? So go dramatically lighter for the inner section of that. we do it. Get all that grot off my brush. So with this one, we're going right in the centre of that area there with this really lightened colour. It's going to look a bit, it's an overall, probably a bit more on that actually. Yeah, I think that's enough. So it's lighter than the outer. We've got that initial halo we've got, then we've this lightish brown bit, and I say just in the centre of that and a few dots down that. I'll put a rust colour when that's dry, and then we'll get a bit of a rust pigment or rust oil and just drag it down the door a little bit, and then that is an intentional scratch. With the decal chipped off, it looks like the decal chipped off. With that colour shift, it does look like it's something that's gone through several layers of paint on a full-size vehicle, which is the effect we're getting. So really, there's nothing I can do now until that paint chip has dried, which we'll start to play about with in a few hours, maybe tomorrow morning, and until at least 24, probably 48 hours until the concrete base has dried. Then we can start to dig out our bit of balsa wood, so we've got the drain cover, and we can crack the concrete by lifting it and breaking it over a lollipop stick and put the grass bank. On the other one, the grass is going to be 2 or 3 millimeters higher, so you've got a change in elevation just to give you some sort of interest. So that's where we are temporarily for now. I'll probably put this up as a video once the plaster's on the base, and then I'll do the final painting as a separate video, so it's short, sharp bursts now till the end. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Right, back again quickly. I just realised I've stuffed up a bit there. The cutouts I had in the balsa frame to alter the height for the verge weren't running parallel with the white line I've put in, so although it's not important, it would have looked a bit ridiculous. So I've just super glued on a couple of little bits of balsa wood there, so I can then carve them down and get them to the right height again. And this is why I've used balsa wood for this. It's so easy to manipulate and maneuver. When you do make a mistake, you can correct it quickly and you're not waiting around all day. So that's super glued on. A couple of minutes, we'll cut it down to the height we want. When we've sanded that and put a coat of paint on it, you'll never see that was a monumental error. Okay, so I'll be back in a second to carry on once it's all set and cured and I've trimmed it. Okay, right, we're back and ready to go. So that's why I like balsa wood. That little repair took seconds. The super glue will hold it. Once it's painted, you'll never see it, and I've corrected the angle of that line. So now we're in the realms of the unknown. My plan is to mix the plaster a little bit stiffer than you'd like. Hold a couple of lolly sticks there as a buffer, because I've got a slight slope on it just to add a bit of interest. We'll lob a load of plaster in there, use my steel rule to level it off, and then just pat it round so we get a bit of an undulating shape in there. Hopefully it won't run underneath that. If it does, we're back to trying to figure out what we're doing. Measurement wise, guesswork. I say this cost a couple of pence. I got it from Amazon. So yeah, we'll just mix it in the little dish we had the cement in. I don't think we're going to need that much of it. I will, however, get a bit of cardboard down, actually thinking about it, because I don't want to spend days cleaning gypsum off my cutting mat. So let's be sensible about things, do that. So let's get a load of this in here. the price of it, I'm prepared to have a lot of wastage or not enough. I really don't know how much this compacts when you get water in it. So we've got that in there. We'll have to get a closed peg on that later on so we don't get any moisture in it. If we don't, it'll last forever. That'll do for now. In fact, as I use stuff, I'll get it off the desk so it's not in the way. So that's out the way there. Normal tap water as before. I'll just lob it in until we get a nice stiff mix. My poor long-suffering steel rule will be the mixing stick for it because it's good for everything, including measuring, obviously. I've got a feeling I'll probably have to mix a little bit more of this, but we'll see. So it's not going to make a major difference height-wise across this this area. I just think if you have everything at one level, you've got no real visual interest. So we'll use this as a little dam, as I say. Let's see if we can get that all lined up. If I push down there, we'll start to lob this stuff in. And because it's going to be a tatty bit of grass on the edge of a concrete apron, we're not going to be that worried about lumps and bumps in it. The more uneven this is, the better, really. And it does seem to be working in that the concrete sub base is sucking out a lot of the moisture, so this should go off relatively quickly. I hope I've got enough because I want to mix. Too much more of it, but we're starting to set. It won't be cured, but it'll set. There's a big difference, as I said before, the concrete be curing and setting. Setting is just going. That'll scrub off, I hope. If not, that'll be a mud stain. I don't know if you saw, there's a little bit of plastic onto the base. That's what I'm rambling on about. But yeah, I want a relatively straight edge down here because I think they would cut that straight to a concrete apron, but once it's on the other side of it, this being a bit rough and undulating isn't going to cause us any grief, because we can always use a bit of that's now a bird dropping officially. We can always use a bit of sandpaper to smooth off any big lumps, so that should do us. It's given us that edge, and if I just take this off now, yep, okay, so you can see the moisture wicking underneath it. So all we can do now is leave that to dry, then I'll give it a light sand down this hard edge and down the edges, and then we're ready to put some static grass on it. But yeah, I'm quite happy with the effect of that. It's just that raised verge we're looking for. I don't want to touch the tilly with all this muck on my hands, but this is almost set now. And just smooth things over if you wanted to, I suppose. A bit cottage cheesy, which is what you want. Maybe get that hard edge softened now without sanding while it's still wet. But it's going to be 20 minutes, half an hour to cure, which is not such a bad thing because it gives me a chance to go and have a cup of tea. So just leave that to do its thing. Then we'll come back, we'll paint it this brown. I'll probably airbrush it. It doesn't brush paint that well. I'm hoping this works. I haven't used this for donkey's years. And then we can worry about static grass. So we're all on course to finish today. I'll just try and scrub some of the grot away with it. Ooh, don't forget you've got things on things when you move them around. That's not the one I want anyway. with a bit of water where I've got a bit of plaster on it. We can pretend it's bird poo up to a point. That's a bit excessive, so hopefully we can just lift that without damaging the paint. If we can't, there's going to be an oil stain on it. It's a general rule. So yeah, okay, we're on course to finish in an hour or so. Not for you, but for me. So I'll switch you off for now. I'll be back in a minute. Hi, so back again. That's been 40-ish minutes since I've put that plaster down, and it's dry enough for what we want now to paint. So I've just run a bit of masking tape across the base. And I say, as a brown for a sub-base for soil, I'm using this old thing, Vallejo Modeler. It might be a bit spluttery and splattery. It's quite thick. I've loaded up my airbrush. The other reason it might be quite splattery is this doesn't like Tamiya paints, and the last thing I sprayed was that white, which was Tamiya with a lacquer thinners. I've cleaned out the airbrush and cleaned it out with a lacquer, acrylic airbrush cleaner, but if it reacts it might go a bit gooey, so if it doesn't, it's not working, I'll switch off. Again, I should have a mask on and I should have an extractor on, but let's just bang this on quick because it's only a rough base, so if the static grass doesn't work out, you'll see soil through it. Yeah. Oops. Yeah, that's the brown, and it was as simple as that. What I was really concentrating on was making sure all the white's missing off the edges, because if we have a little bit of the white plaster showing through, you can bet you any money that that's the bit that the static grass won't stick to, and then we'll end up with a white patch. So that white line now is looking whiter, which is what we want. It was looking a bit beige before. Might be a bit too close to the grass on reflection, but yeah, it's where it is. It doesn't really matter too much. And just to give us a sort of feel of what we're going for, now my hands are cleaner, our little truck's going to sit somewhere like that. So you'll see the drain cover, you'll see the grass beside it, cracked concrete there, which should be visually quite appealing. And while we're waiting for that to dry, which won't take long, we'll try hiding a few of the errors we've got kicking about. So if I put a little blob of that on there, grab a cocktail stick, put my eye magnifier on because I'm blind as a bat, drop a bit of PVA glue in this area here, get it to nestle down. This will all make sense in a minute. It's not again where I want it to, but that's all right. So we've got a bit there. We'll open up the static grass, get my tweezers out, and we'll start to work the base a little bit so it's got a bit more visual appeal. And I'm keeping this bit of cardboard down because this stuff gets everywhere. And you just take a pinch of the actual, oh no, I don't want a rock in there. See, I quite like the way this comes with rock. Let's put a bit down. With rocks, it does make it a little bit more interesting, but I think it's a bit overly done. It's model railway scenic stuff. It's not necessarily for this scale. We'll just start to do there. So we've got some foliage growing out of the cracks in the base, and we'll put another bit over in this corner. I don't want it everywhere, but I just want it to look like, oops, sorry, with a bit of soil. Grass has taken root, because it does tend to, what am I doing? I'm not thinking. It does tend to take root everywhere, doesn't it? So we can just do that, and again get another few tufts. With that, my hands are stuck up. That'll drop, get another few tufts in these areas, as though it's growing through as an invasive species. If you have the static grass applicator, you could really make this stand up. That'll do for that. Maybe over here in this corner as well, because you've got quite a deep hole there. So one would assume this close to the edge, that'd be colonised. Got a big chunk there, but not all of this will stick, don't forget. It's only where it hits the glue it'll stick. So that's all right. That's added a bit more interest there. I've got to remember where I left that grid now. So while we're doing it, we don't need to do any more painting on there, so we can get our little grid in place. It fits one way better than another. And where there's a bit of a hole there, don't panic about that. You probably weren't panicking. There's a way of getting around that. It's just a bit green when we did it, so it crumbled away a bit. But so this is just standard off-the-shelf wood glue, nothing fancy. It's not a modelling product as such. That'll be enough to hold it, because no one's going to be picking this up and jinking it round too much. So that can pop in there. Don't know if you heard that, Spitfire's just flown over. I live on a flight path to one of these ones where you can have a pleasure flight on a Spitfire, so you quite often hear them. Right, now we've got a bit of a divot in that. Can I just, yeah, you are on camera. Yeah. So to try and fill that up, I did collect some of the ground concrete where I'd plucked it up before. So what we're going to do is just try and get some of the powder. What can I scoop that up with? Maybe tweezers is enough. No, it's not. I'll be there all day. Oh, hello. In the meantime, we've knocked over our tilly, which you didn't see that, but worrying. And what have I got as a little scoopy thing? Everywhere's a mess at the moment because I've been on 2 projects, as I say. Bit of scrap plastic, that'll do. Why just fill that gap in there? With a powdered concrete that I collected when I had a bit of a broken base. We can make that look a lot better. This bit might fit in. want to avoid big chunks for this to work. I just want to get something filled in there. If I get this right, it'll look like a bit of a degenerated surface without actually looking like a gap or a hole. So and if we get our ballast freeze, I'll just lock all that in. And again, that bit of staining won't matter because we're going to put a bit of staining around that grid anyway. So what have we got? We've got a muddy sub base, we've got our grid in place, bits of static grass on there. Give that another couple of minutes and then we'll come back and apply the static grass over the top. I will take out some of the rocks before I do that. Yeah, I mean, it'll look like it is. It won't look like a professional diorama's been on the case, maker's been on the case, but it'll give a bit of a context to where our Tilly stands in the world, which is getting a bit battered and bruised as it stands. So I'll switch off for a minute and then we'll come back and do the final little bits on the static grass. Okay, back again. It's been about 10 minutes and we've got this to a level where that's touch dry, so we're relatively happy. We can go on with that. If we're not, it'll go wrong. So I've got a disposable shot glass from a local supermarket. They're disposable, so I don't really like using them, but it's messy to clean out PVAs. And a good dollop of PVA glue in there. Bit of water because you don't want it massively thick. One of my ubiquitous cocktail sticks. I've put a bit of masking tape roughly down there, but I'm not too bothered if this glue goes a bit on there and a bit glass stick. So you don't want a pristine straight edge in this, in that the whole area is looking a bit beaten up. So if you had immaculately cut grass. And the other thing I've done off camera is I've decanted some of the static grass into my little petri dish, but I've plucked out quite a few of the stones that were in there. I want some in to add a bit of interest, but again, it's an airfield and propellers tend to blow things around, so you don't really want rocks everywhere. So I'd imagine the area would be pretty heavily de-rocked to stop damage to things when it happens. So I've got an old paintbrush here. We don't want this to dry when it's on, so we want to work quite quickly and just dab it on as thick as you like. It's more about speed than accuracy from my memory of doing this before, which I don't do that often. So it's a very old paintbrush. It's not one I'm particularly precious about. Washing this out is going to be a bit of a mess. I'll do it because this is one I use for other jobs. But so pretty much universally covered. And again, you can buy static grass applicators, but for what I'm doing and the amount of times I do this sort of job, no, I'm just going to put it on, pat it down and let the glue soak up into it. And then we're going to leave this while I go and have lunch. And by then the glue should have hardened up enough that we can brush off the excess, and then we can patch bits in where we feel we need it later on. So we find bits where it's a bit bare, we can put it in. But that was the point of doing the brown coat as well. It's it can be threadbare grass if we want it to be. It really doesn't matter for what we're doing. It's just giving the feeling of a grass verge and all of this stuff that doesn't stick this time round. It'll go back in the bag to be used again. So it's a sort of zero waste process, really. It's I probably won't put the stones back in the bag this time because the bag was getting a bit stone heavy. I was getting more stone than grass at one point. I'm just trying to sort this out. But that, I mean, that you won't get that much sticking to it. It'll be a lot thinner than that. But you get the idea where we're going to get our grassy base, degraded concrete, and little truck. So it gives a bit of context and visual appeal to the truck. We've also got to put in some mud pigments and dust pigments on the concrete and the truck. Then we'll blend the two together. So the dust on that should blend in with the base. So it looks like the truck should be there. But I don't think I can do much more until that's all dry. So again, it's time for me to have a break. You'll see me in seconds. I would imagine I'll leave that in this temperature 40 minutes to an hour, really, just to get the PVA to grip that enough that we can brush stuff off. It'll really need overnight to harden, but for us to carry on working, 40 minutes to an hour should be fine. So I'll switch it off and be back soon. Okay, yeah, so that's working to bring it back a bit. This may set your teeth on edge, but I've got an old worn sanding stick and just lightly flashing over, and it's fading all the soily deposits into the concrete because the concrete does bonding with it, and it's quite a nice effect on that white line. There's a bit of water staining cracking over there, which is quite nice. So yeah, I think I'm relatively happy with that as a dusty finish on that. So the next thing I need to do is find me tweezers amongst all this mess and just get a few. This is me herbs Provençal. Just put a few bits and pieces. And I'm going to fix that down with the old ballast fixer and hope that it doesn't. And then a bit of the oregano, slightly different size. Just scatter that. Along the edge, because it's natural. You look at any roadside, you're getting all this sort of crud there. And I'm just going to put this ballast fixer on it. I've got a drop left, and that should increase the staining a little bit. Just hold that in place, so later on when we blow it, it'll be all right. So yeah, I'm relatively happy with what we've done there. Hoping I'm still on camera. Now the next is our tilly's going to sit on this base, and the base has got this dark earth mess all over it, and the tilly hasn't. Now I said earlier on, and I mean it, I don't really want the tilly that dirty. I would imagine it's quite a well looked after vehicle. It's only going to trundle around air bases, so it's not going to be going off road or anything. So we don't want a lot. But if we were to just concentrate on the sills and the lower wheel arches and the sides of the wheels, it'll just give the impression that the same grime that we've just put all over that. Oh, my compressor's still on, sorry. The same grime we've just put all over that runway is on the lower quarters of the truck, and again it just ties in everything. So we've got the concrete tied into the grass tied into the mud. We've got bits of crud across both of them. Now we're just getting that ever so slight dusting that it'd pick up if it's travelling around in the dry. It's not mud or dust or anything, it's just a sort of dust that would throw up as it was trundling around the concrete areas of a. There's not going to be much at the front unless it's going in convoy. It's all going to be at the back where the wheels have thrown it up. So we're just lightly blend that in. This 1/4 just. We have quite a subtle effect on it. It's not. But there's no way this wouldn't have the same mud and dirt that was on the rest of the roads it's travelled round. So I'll just carry on doing that gently. Yeah, just picking it up nicely now. I'm hoping to stay on in shot for a lot of this because I keep forgetting I'm. But that should be enough to make it look like it's part of the scene it's sitting in. It doesn't want to look like it's filthy. It just wants to look like it's had a few days trimming around. This is drying off a bit as well, so this is going to be a little bit. Probably have it parked about here. All four wheels from the ground. Right. So I'm going to say, with the exception of just maybe buffing that a little bit more. That is about finished. So what I'll do is I'll have a bit of a tidy up. I'll put it on a base. I'll revolve it round, discuss what I've done, take a few photos, and that's done. And then I'll talk about what I'm going to do next. And it won't be anything as long and as boring as this. So thanks for your patience, and I'll be back in a second. Hi, we've had a bit of a hiccup there. The battery went flat on my microphone without me realising, so there was no sound recording for this bit, so I'm going to have to talk over it, so it might be a little bit out of sync of what you're seeing. But anyway, that's the Tilly finished. It's gone on far too long. It was enjoyable to do, and I've learned quite a bit about how to mess about with video editing and putting stuff on YouTube. But from now on, we'll be on to shorter videos or more concise videos that don't have quite as much rambling or waffle on them. So as for the way it turned out, yeah, I'm quite happy. The base will blend in a little bit better as it gets a little bit older. The run by the gutter, it's still a bit damp where I washed the pigment in. So when that dries, that'll lighten considerably. The kit itself flew together. The only sort of issues were of my making. The base was, yeah, I mean, it's just a case of tying everything in. So we've got the same dusty feel over it. The grass ties into the grass on the runway. The runway's got the same soil as the background, and it just adds that little bit of height by having that step up to the grass. I feel you get that sort of three-dimensional look for it. One of the problems you can see there is the scuff on the decal. I'm not sure when I did that. I'm kind of glad I did, because it's added a little bit of character to it rather than just panic and try and pretend it didn't happen by painting it in as a scratch or a chip. I think it's just added a little bit of something to it, and the light dusting around the lower half just blends everything to the base, or I hope it does. That was my plan. There's not much more I can say about that, really. I'm going to put some still photos on after this, and if you have been watching, thank you very much. I appreciate your support. It's been fun to do, and I will do something else. In fact, as soon as the microphone recharges, there's something else will be starting a kit from scratch. So what I'm going to do on the next video is see how much it costs to start the hobby from nothing. I started modelling as a young person. Then I gave it up. Then I came back to it, and it's that coming back to it. Initially, it seems quite expensive. And I was just thinking of a day, just how much is it? So I've bought a basic kit, a basic toolkit, and the bare minimum of paints. And I'm going to see if I can make something as though starting from scratch, out airbrushes, compressors, or fancy tools. So that video will be coming up shortly. But for now, I'm going to stop talking. You'll see me rotate this round a little bit more. Then you'll see some stills on screen. And that will be the end of the Tilly. Thank goodness. I say I've talked too much. Sorry about that. But thanks for all your support and your help so far. And if you've got any comments, feel free to add them. Thanks a lot. Bye.